If you're curious and read the title of the video, yes, this is going to be another Arc 3.0 build video. We're coming back to the Warlock, and obviously I already did my build on the new exotic, the Fallen Sunstar, but I wanted to come back to an old exotic, which was the Crown of Tempest, which before the Arc 3.0 changes for the Warlock, it was still very, very good. So I wanted to come in and make a build specifically for this, and let me tell you, you're going to have your abilities a lot here. Now with the new season, the helmet was updated a little bit for its exotic perk. So Conduction Tines, Arc ability, or Jolt final blows increase the recharge rate of your arc abilities and extend the duration of Storm Trance. So again, it's arc abilities and anytime targets get jolted, which is again the new Arc 3.0 debuff. And again, this goes across all your abilities, grenade, melee, and class ability, and allows for that Storm Trance to last a lot longer. So ad clear can be a cinch. Now let's talk about what I'm using in the subclass. So first up, super wise using Storm Trance because again, Chaos Reach does not get the benefit from the helmet, so might as well rock Storm Trance, right? Ability wise, again, class ability doesn't really matter. I'm just rocking Healing Rift. You can do Empowering if you want. Movement really doesn't matter. Melee, this doesn't really matter either. You can either go Chain Lightning or Ball Lightning. Just note when you're amplified with Chain Lightning, you get an additional set of chains. So chains more targets. And then with Ball Lightning, it releases an additional lightning strikes before it detonates. So it pretty much does 3 drop downs or 3 hits before it detonates. So that's the only difference. Aspect wise, highly recommend having on Electrostatic Mind. This is going to be kind of the crutch of the whole thing on top of having Crown of Tempest. But whenever you defeat a target with arc abilities or defeating jolted or blinded targets, it creates an Ionic Trace. And when you collect an Ionic Trace, you become amplified. So on top of having your arc abilities a lot on Crown of Tempest, getting kills, either jolted, blinding targets, arc abilities, you're going to get an Ionic Trace spawn. When you collect it, you're going to be amplified. So all in all, as long as you're continuing a gunfight in PvE, you're going to be amplified almost constantly. The other aspect, again, you can either go with Lightning Surge, which again is the new melee. So when you slide, you blink forward, it calls down lightning strikes that jolt targets. So you will pretty much automatically create an Ionic Trace if you kill targets with the melee. It's very powerful. But the other option here, if you want to be kind of more team support, this is a good option. Arc Soul. When you cast your rift, it creates an Arc Soul that fires at targets in front of you. Allies can pass through the rift to get the Arc Soul, and went off there a second. And it charges your rift faster when your allies are near. So you're already going to be getting your class ability and all your other abilities back very quickly with Crown of Tempest, but this will make it even faster. And when you're amplified, and like I mentioned, you're going to be amplified almost constantly, your Arc Souls are supercharged and gain an increased fire rate, which means all your teammates benefit from that. Arc Soul kills count as arc ability kills, so that procs in Conduction Tines. You're going to have a very fast recharge. Now, fragment wise, these are just the ones that I'm using. There's a couple in here that you can substitute that I'll talk about, but mainly I'm going to be using Spark of Beacon. So when you're amplified, your arc special weapons, final blows create a blinding explosion. Again, any blinded or jolted targets create an Ionic Trace. We want those. Next, Spark of Shock, your arc grenades, jolt targets. Like I mentioned, grenades. I'm just using the pulse grenade. Actually, I didn't talk about this, but you can use any of them, honestly. As long as you know where to throw them, you're fine. I'd probably opt for something like Pulse, Storm, the Arc Bolt Grenade. But mainly, I would do Pulse or Storm Grenade, personally. On top of that, Spark of Ions. Defeating a jolted target creates an Ionic Trace. So again, your arc grenades are going to jolt targets. That's going to create an Ionic Trace. If you go with Lightning Surge, that jolts targets. That's going to create an Ionic Trace, which is going to work out in your favor. Lastly, you could do Spark Resistance. While you're surrounded by combatants, you are more resistant to incoming damage. So again, this one's always going to come in clutch. You gain pretty much more damage resistance. Another one to look into is Spark of Amplitude. This one will be interesting. Rapidly defeating targets while you are amplified creates an orb of power. That's great because with this build, you're going to be pretty much always constantly amplified. So you could use this one for the final slot. But again, there are a couple others in here that you can look into. But like I said, these are the ones I recommend. Beacons, Shock, Ions, Amplitude. You can switch that out for resistance. Next, let's talk about some of the armor mods that I'm using. So just note, you can switch around these mods in pretty much any armor slot that you want. And I'm also going to be talking about some mods that you can substitute in after this. So first up, on the helmet, I'm rocking Font of Wisdom. So picking up an elemental well that matches your subclass energy type grants you a temporary significant increase to your intellect, improving the recharge rate of your super. So whatever your intellect is at, once you pick up, in this case, what would be an arc elemental well, since that will match our subclass, it'll bring your intellect up to 100 for a short amount of time. So again, having the cooldown from Conduction Tines already, we're going to have our super back pretty quickly. Next up on the gauntlets, I'm rocking Font of Might. Picking up an elemental well that matches your subclass energy type grants a temporary bonus to weapon damage of that same elemental type, in this case being Arc. On my chest piece, I'm rocking Bountiful Wells. Elemental well mods that cause you to spawn elemental wells now can stack, spawning additional wells for each additional copy of the mod that you have. So the reason I'm doing this is because whenever you pick up an elemental well, it grants energy to your ability with the lowest current energy. So again, elemental wells, you don't just pick them up and you obviously get all the bonuses and all that, but you also get ability energy back, which is helpful. On my boots, I'm rocking Melee Wellmaker. Powered melee combatant final blows spawn elemental wells matching your subclass energy type. Again, it's going to be Arc. On the class ability, I'm rocking an Elemental Ordnance. Defeating a combatant with a grenade spawns an elemental well that matches your subclass energy type. Again, it's going to create an Arc elemental well. And then the other things you can do is look into the artifact mods specifically for the class items. So again, I have two options here. Lightning strikes twice. After throwing a grenade, gain increased grenade recharge for a short time. Arc final blows extend the duration of this benefit. Again, it's Arc final blows, so it can be from Arc weapons, Arc abilities, whatever. Getting that grenade back faster is pretty good for this build. The other thing you can do is do Trace Evidence. Defeating combatants affected by Arc debuff spawns an Ionic Trace. Again, collecting Ionic Traces also gives you a small ability cooldown on top of that. But the main reason people don't like rocking Lightning Strikes twice, and I agree with this, is that it costs 7. 7 is a lot. And to be honest, you can get your abilities back pretty quick without this. So having Trace Evidence on would be better. And then you can put on something like, you know, Bad Amplitude if you're facing champions. Again, damaging a champion with an Arc ability causes the champion to become jolted. And again, Jolt Blind and killing things with Arc abilities kind of runs with this build. Again, Surge Detonators. Again, your Arc Grenades disrupt combatants, so pretty much you can stun Overload champions. And there's a couple other things on the artifact as well. You know, Amped Up. Granted, I don't think we're going to need that, but I'm just saying two things I'd look into: Trace Evidence or Lightning Strikes twice. Either one of those, fantastic. Now, some other mods you could substitute. Personally, I would try to keep something like Elemental Ordnance and then Melee Wellmaker so you can create some orbs. That's a really easy way to do it, especially if we're going to have our abilities cool down very fast. But if you wanted to do something with Elemental Charge, this could come in handy as well. Again, you become Charge of Light by picking up an Elemental Well, and if it matches your subclass energy type, you get Charge of Light ×2. And then pairing that, you know, with something like, you know, High Energy Fire, giving your weapons more damage. Again, Lightning Strike, again, defeating combatants with melee damage spawns 1 orb for your allies. Heavy-handed, again, you get half of your melee energy back. Firepower, half your grenade back. I mean, even something like, oh, where's it at? This one right here, Energy Converter. While your Charge of Light, using your grenade attacks grants you super energy, consuming all stacks of Charge of Light. And then the more stacks you have, the more energy you gain, up to a maximum of 50% super energy. And if you pair that with something like Supercharge, you have 2 additional stacks Charge of Light, maximum up to ×5. So once you collect like 2 or 3 elemental wells, and then throw out your grenade, you get a bump to your super energy. And so you're already getting your abilities back pretty quickly on top of that. So you're pretty much going to get up to 50% super energy very quickly. Now, if you wanted to stick with something like Font of Wisdom, Font of Might, again, you could look into other things like, you know, Well Striking. Since we're going to be creating Arc Wells, this one, when you pick up an Arc Elemental Well, it grants you additional melee energy. That could potentially come in handy. You know, something like Elemental Time Dilation, this one's nice. Any Elemental Well mods that grant you time-limited benefits now stack, increasing the duration. So again, Font of Might would last longer, Font of Wisdom will last longer, which means you would have you know, a longer duration for Arc weapon damage and allowing your intellect to stay at 100 longer. So you have a multitude of options here, which is fantastic. You just got to find which one you like playing with the most. Now, weapon options here, I really don't think are a big deal, but one thing to look at is the new Delicate Tin Fusion Rifle that came with the season. I know I've talked about it a lot, but it's honestly something that's really good for this build. Again, final blows of this weapon have a chance to generate an Ionic Trace. Powerful foes and opposing guardians always generate Ionic Traces, but then when you collect it, you get its perk Tempest Cascade. Collecting an Ionic Trace overcharges this weapon's next shot, jolting targets on hit. So again, any jolts targets, you get that ability cooldown, you get a conduction times, but also you can look into weapons with the new perk Bolt Shot. Again, reloading this weapon after defeating a target overcharges this weapon for a short period of time, causing it to jolt on its next hit. The sidearm on the Season Pass actually comes with this. I got it to drop naturally with the Tarnished Metal Scout Rifle, but again, Bolt Shot could work as well. If you're not casting the synergy, I'll try to explain it to the best of my ability, but there is a lot going on here. But just note, the main thing here is trying to proc the perk on the Crown of Tempest, Conduction Times, Arc ability kills, and Jolt kills to get that ability cooldown. Alright, so Elemental Ordnance and Melee Wellmaker will create Arc Elemental Wells. We pick those up. We get Font of Might, so extra Arc weapon damage. We get Font of Wisdom. Again, increase the Intellect, so our super will cool down even faster on top of Conduction Times. And again, in the Arc 3.0 subclass, again, defeating any targets with Arc abilities, or if they're jolted or blinded, creates an Ionic Trace. When we collect the Ionic Trace, we are amplified. And again, amplified gives us a bunch of benefits, moving faster, all this other stuff. Again, if you decide to rock Lightning Surge for the slide melee, you're going to jolt targets, creating Ionic Trace. If you have the Arc Soul aspect on, again, while you're amplified, which is pretty much all the time, your Arc Souls are going to be supercharged. Your teammates can get those. Again, your Grenade on top of that with the Fragments, Spark of Shock, which jolts targets. Oh, by the way, when you jolt a target, it creates an Ionic Trace. You're good there. Oh, by the way, with your Arc Special Weapon, whenever you're amplified, it's going to create a blinding explosion. So if you're rocking Delicate Tomb and collecting Ionic Traces, you're amplified, and the weapon gets its Tempest Cascade perk, which will jolt targets and blind targets at the same time, creating Ionic Traces. And then if you wanted to rock Spark of Amplitude, for example, rapidly defeating targets while you are amplified creates an Orb of Power. Again, you're going to be creating a lot of orbs when you're amplified and getting a lot of targets killed. You know, if you wanted to rock Spark Resistance, again, more resistance to incoming damage, that's not even a big deal. Just know that this thing is pretty much an ad clearing, amplified Ionic Trace machine, something similar to the Fallen Sunstar build, but this focuses mainly on, you know, your personal arc ability recharge, and you can make this very, very fast. But that, ladies and gentlemen, is my Arc 3.0 Crown of Tempest Warlock build. Again, like I mentioned, there's a million different things you can substitute in for this. It works pretty universally, but there are a few things in here, like I mentioned, that I would highly recommend using for this build if you're going to be using Crown of Tempest in PvE. Anyway, guys, if you like what you saw, you can always drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and then turn on that bell next to notifications so you don't miss out on another one of these videos. If you didn't know, I moved over from Twitch to YouTube, so we are streaming on YouTube now. Everything is here. We have our long form, short form, and live stream content all in one place, which is fantastic. If you want to come by the stream, we will be doing King's Fall carries throughout the season. We'll also be playing, you know, with the community, doing Iron Banner, and any other type of activities that you guys want to do in Destiny 2. And if you do want a King's Fall carry, be sure to join my Discord. That link will be in the description. Again, that's how we're going to communicate. Obviously, we are talking about Destiny 2 in the Discord. It's obviously a big topic of conversation. But again, we're also talking about PC tech, anime, and other topics as well. Lastly, if you didn't know, we hit YouTube Partner a couple months ago, which is freaking fantastic. But that also opens up a couple of exclusive things for the channel, one of them being memberships. If you don't know what memberships are, they're pretty much something similar to being a Twitch subscriber. Again, you'll get access to certain emotes, the monthly badges, and other exclusive things as well. So again, if you do want to join as a member, that button is right next to the subscribe button. Not telling you what to do, but again, it's one of those things where if you would like to support me even more than what you are now by viewing the video, liking it, all that great jazz, that is an option. But anyway, guys, hope to catch you in the next video. Cheers!